All right, we'll begin our lecture with, and actually a lot of what we'll be talking about in the second half of the year is going to deal with this big question here. Why was Europe able to conquer so much? I mean, this is a big question we want to ask in history. We're looking up to, just talked about Zheng He, just talked about, international trade. The Muslim world this time is very powerful. In the 1400s, China is the Ming Dynasty, is seriously powerful, but from 1400 and then when 1500 rolls around all the way into 1600, we see a huge reversal, and Europe takes a lot of power. So one of the big questions we're going to ask in the second half of the year is why? Why is Europe able to dominate so much? What happens to allow this to take place? All right, so let's take a look at our first question is, why did Europe want to explore foreign lands? And why was Europe so gung-ho on this? They weren't the only civilization in the world that wanted to do this, but why were they so eager to explore? Well, let's take a look at our motivations. Number one, there was a search for basic resources and land suitable for the cultivation of cash crops. Now, what happened in Europe is Europe had actually exhausted a large supply of their natural resources. The woods, even like animals and things had been chopped down, and it exhausted a large part of their land. So there was a desire to establish new trade routes in Asia. At the same time, there was also a desire to expand the influence of Christianity. So the expansion of Spain and Portugal, who will be the first ones to really expand out, they'll expand out to other lands. Italy at the same time also is very much wanting to expand in trade. So Italy, Spain, and Portugal are the ones who really are the catalysts, and the ones who start this. So the expansion of Spain and Portugal, however, was one of the most impressive and history-changing events to ever take place. And for centuries, the expansion of faith was also connected with military glory and economic profit. So there was a desire coming from still the period of the Crusades to go out and to conquer other peoples and to show Christianity was the top religion. And at the same time, there was a desire to get more goods, especially spices, which are becoming very valuable in Europe at this time. All right, so in the crusading expansionist ideology, profit and also spreading Christianity went together. Wealth was based on the conquest and domination. And this really happened in Spain during the time when they expelled the Moors. So we had learned how Spain was taken over for a long period of time, 600-700 years, by the Moors who invaded and took over Spain. And eventually the Christians were able to, what's called basically the Reconquest, was able to take back Spain from the Moors and expel them. Well, there was a desire with this to keep expanding and to keep expanding Christianity. So the religious belief was that crusading and profit were viewed as harmonious and complementary, that they went together. So during the 14th and 15th century, there was also a demand, especially among the upper class in Europe, for luxury goods that could be supplied only from what they would call the Orient, or from more of the Middle East and China. Goods such as cotton cloth from India, fine silks from China, exotic precious stones, peppers, cinnamon, ginger, other spices, cloves to flavor food. Especially with the tainted meat that they could have, it would actually preserve it and keep it a lot longer. So during the 14th century, Italian and Catalan, when I say Catalan, that today would be the area of Spain, merchants enriched themselves as middlemen for trade goods for the rest of Europe. For many years, Muslim traders brought Asian goods to Cairo, where Italian merchants would then purchase them and bring them back to Western Europe. And this is, again, why the Italian city-states grew so much, and which started the Renaissance. The Europeans wanted more and more cheaper Asian goods, especially spices. So they wanted to get around what they saw as the middlemen, which would be Central Asia, Southwest Asia, and the Muslim world, which definitely had a monopoly in the trade that was going to Europe. So they tried to seek it out through the sea. So maritime access to Africa, which they eventually start going down, and on the way to trying to get to Asia, they start exploring Africa. And this provides the gold, ivory, and even will provide slaves that Europe wanted without having to go through the Muslim merchants. So they will start traveling around Africa on their way to Asia, but they will also, get a lot of goods that come from the African kingdoms. So this leads Portugal down the coast of West Africa to Sierra Leone in 1460. So basically they start trying to go around Africa on the way to Asia. Due to technological and cultural advances, Portugal was able to dominate world trade for about 200 years, from the 15th to 16th centuries. While in the 15th century, the rest of Europe was decimated by the Black Plague, Portugal was kind of isolated because of its physical isolation on the Iberian Peninsula. Additionally, Portugal had strong national identity due to its national geographic borders, and this allowed them to pool or consolidate their economic resources necessary for these expeditions. And also, Portugal just has a good location there, right next to the ocean, which is good for naval, for travel by water. All right, so Portugal had extended contact with Islam too, because they were part of the Iberian Peninsula with Spain that was taken over by the Muslims. And this gave them access to mathematical knowledge, sailing technologies, sail shapes, hull designs, maritime, sea weaponry, that results in the Portuguese fleet being able to negotiate and sail, basically, on the high Atlantic seas. So Portugal really begins like going out and exploring. They really start exploring the west coast of Africa. The most celebrated feature in Portuguese maritime history, we would call him Prince Henry the Navigator. Prince Henry the Navigator. He knew a lot about science, and he was very curious about geography. And also, he had the crusading ideal and wanted to go against the Muslims and to convert people. He was interested in profit from gold, sugar, and slaves. And he was actually a prince, but he was basically had like no chance to become king, so he wanted to seek out his own, fame and his own fortune for himself. And again, that would be an ideal that also came with the Renaissance, seeking his individual achievement. So he led outfitting expeditions into the Atlantic Ocean and down the west coast of Africa. And he started basically what he founded was the Order of Christ, and this worked with the crown, with the government of Portugal, and he also funded these explorations, and he funded them at a loss because he spent much of his personal fortune trying to establish these expeditions to the west coast of Africa. It wasn't profitable at first. And basically he was led by his drive to convert people and exploration, and this is what's led to the beginning of Prince Henry the Navigator's expeditions. So technology is what really allows the Europeans to advance in their explorations. By the 15th century, there were a lot of achievements in maritime technology and navigation, again, many of which came from the Muslim world, and the Portuguese were able to take them the Spanish. Now, because of this, both the Portuguese and the Spanish, mainly starting off with the Portuguese, were able to dominate northwest African trade. Basically, you got Portugal right there. And from Portugal, they're able to slowly go a little further out, and get to the west coast of Africa. But what allows them to do this is a number of inventions. One would be the first use of regular navigational charts, which were invented by and made mostly by the Italian and sailors from the Iberian Peninsula. And there was a school of cartography started at the Palma de Mallorca, which was staffed mainly by Jewish experts in cartography, and is the best in the world in the 14th century, which is producing outstanding atlases. The Catalan Atlas of 1375 was produced, and what this did was, when the sailors went out, they were eventually able to chart the water, and they were able to show people where to go and how to get back. And because of this school, many Europeans were able to go out and make further explorations. A ship design in the 15th and 16th centuries also made a huge impact. The caravel. The caravel of the 15th and 16th centuries was a ship with a distinct shape and very admirable qualities. It was fast, it was easy to maneuver, and it was the Portuguese and Spanish sailors started using it. Now, the Nina, Pinta, and Nina and Pinta were supposedly caravels, and Columbus repeatedly praised his favorite ship, the Nina, for its speed, maneuverability, and safety. And again, many of these ship designs that came from, the Italians and the people from the Iberian Peninsula, but again, were very much influenced by earlier discoveries by Muslim sailors. So, they definitely shaped the fate. Muslim sailors shaped the fate of the 15th and 16th century caravel. As Muslims conquered various lands throughout the Mediterranean and Western world, they borrowed learning from the people who they took over. Unlike other conquerors, they didn't just put their worldview on, which is kind of what the Europeans did. What the Muslims were really good was taking the ideas from the people they conquered and improving them. And this is why they were able to get such good ship designs, for example, and many other inventions, like the astrolabe, which we are going to watch a video on. The astrolabe is something that the Muslims took from the Greeks and improved it, and actually used it originally for traveling in the desert. We're going to watch the video on the astrolabe, but what it does is it allows you to travel at night by looking at the stars for direction. And they're able to take that, improve it, and then the Europeans get it, and they're able to use it to sail. And the Muslims also use it to sail as well, but they're able to use it to sail beyond where you could see. Before they had this, the Europeans were kind of limited to, they could only sail where they could see land. And once you get away from land, it's a pretty scary concept if you don't have a good device. While the Muslims, the Moors in Spain, were able to travel much further out, and they were able to go past land and use the stars as navigational charts. Also, as the Europeans begin sailing, there becomes an understanding of the patterns of prevailing winds. They learn that there's the winds that can take them out. You'll see on this map, once they start going to the Americas, they learn the prevailing winds which will help them get out, and then the prevailing winds which will bring them back. And they start using these in the travels to America. So you travel out this way, and you come back this way. And they use this first when they're starting to go around Africa. So they learn how to travel using the wind. The wind that the Portuguese called this would be the volta do mar, which I believe is one of your vocabulary words. It took a little bit longer, but it was much faster and safer to travel with the wind than against it. Also, things that are invented are the magnetic compass is invented, used to determine directions at the same time. And they're able to determine latitude and longitude at this time by using cross staffs, black staffs. Mariners are able to measure the angle of the sun or the polar star above the horizon, basically by using staffs, long sticks, which would allow them to measure latitude and longitude. So this will take them out to exploring Africa. Now again, 13th century Portugal, before the explorations, Portugal was relatively poor and it was in need of resources. This pushes the Portuguese out. The Portuguese began pushing into the Atlantic and find islands that would support Europe's demand for sugar production. So what they do is the Portuguese kind of go out from Portugal, they go on these islands. The Azores Islands are right here, the Canary Islands in this area, and eventually they travel further out here and they start planting sugar and have sugar production on there, which they start with the help of Italian business people who come in and help them get this started. Now, most of the West African coast was explored in the period from 1415 to the 1600s. And the preserved maps from this period show a remarkably accurate understanding of the complicated coastline in Africa. The African exports consist basically of gold, ivory, and pepper. However, 175,000 slaves were also taken during Europe to the Americas from 1415 to 1600, and to the Americas. In the 1600, with the involvement of the Dutch and the English, slavery grows exponentially. But originally it starts off with the Portuguese and the Spanish. From the time of the arrival on the shores of Sierra Leone in 1460 until eventually they decline as leaders in world exploration, the Portuguese had a relationship with their African trading partners which was kind of equal, basically. They would go to the cities that they viewed as equally large, complex, and technically advanced as their capital of Lisbon at their time. So the Portuguese were like, well, their cities are just as good as our cities, like Lisbon. And the Portuguese experienced not much culture shock, not as much as we would expect. They saw the urban centers in West Africa comparable to the urban centers in Europe, and they were equal trade partners for a long time. And how slavery starts getting traded is that slaves are what the Africans are willing to trade. Many societies had slaves at this time, and there wasn't a black people are slaves mentality. These were the people we trade with, and one of the commodities they traded was slaves. Many African cities at this time were deemed to be even larger and more hygienic and better organized than those of Europe. Additionally, the Portuguese shared many beliefs about magic and supernatural beliefs. They had similar beliefs that the Africans